Welcome to our podcast tonight. Psalms 46, Overcoming Tough Times, How to Deal with the Crisis. And we'll look at Biden, that's right, Joe Biden, kicking homeschooling Christian family, yes, out of our country. And 1,000 minors, ages to 12 all the way to 17, 1,000 missing in a Democratic-run city. What in the world is going on? All right, I want to show you something. I went and looking at this very first segment. I want to talk about these homeschool family that they're trying to kick out of our country. All right, that's what Biden is. But I just want to show you something. Now I got this from Fox News, and it's almost nothing. So I'm gonna throw this away. Nothing. So I went on WND.com, and here's where I found some information. Now I'm going to give you just a little bit of background. Here's a Christian family that is facing deportation. They have been in our country 15 years. One or two of the kids are already married. They've had two or three other kids since they've been in this country. They want to kick them out and send them back to Germany. In Germany, they were homeschooling their kids and they were fined thousands of dollars. Matter of fact, it's illegal to homeschool in Germany. I did not know that. I just found that out. And because this family, their kids were being bullied, their kids were not only being bullied, but being taught really crazy junk, all the gender stuff. The same thing is going on in many of our schools as well. They said we can't put up with that. We have to homeschool our kids. They need a good, strong education, a normal education. So when they began to do that, the government took control, fined them, almost put them in jail, and even threatened to take their kids away. So 15 years ago, they came to our country to not only start a new life, but they also came in order to teach and homeschool their kids, which should be a fundamental right in every country, but we have that right here in America. Well, here's an article from WND.com, written by Kate Anderson from the Daily Caller News Foundation. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, that's ICE, told a German Christian family that was persecuted for homeschooling their children that they needed to prepare to be deported after living in the U.S. for 15 years. This is according to Kevin Bowden, an attorney with the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, which is called the HSLDA. They spoke to the Daily Caller News Foundation. Now, Yui and Hannelore Rumke, hopefully I'm not pronouncing that right, Rumke or Remeke, they fled with their family from Germany in 2008. They were fined thousands of dollars because they refused to stop homeschooling. Did you know that this was outlawed in 1918 in Germany? Homeschooling was outlawed in 1918. They came to America, sought asylum in the U.S. before being granted, indefinite deferred action status in 2014. This allowed them to stay in America, in our country, indefinitely. But during the routine check-in with the agency in early September of this year, the New Jersey parents were informed that they needed to have their passports ready, in 4 weeks to be deported to Germany. Now, the attorney says this: they did not tell them why. They were just told that there was a change in orders. We don't know where the orders have come down from. I did some checking. I knew where they came from. They may have come to the local office from the field office director or the deputy field office director, which probably came from the ICE headquarters. Whether it came from the Biden administration or somebody more at the executive level, we don't know. Just the change in orders. Get travel documents ready and get ready to go. Well, to be honest with you, looking at what actually happened, it definitely was ICE, but also the Department of Justice or the Department of Injustice. The same people, the same stupid, evil people who have allowed our border invasion, and if you haven't read the news, 260,000 plus came into the country September, which actually has broken a record. That is the most illegals coming into our country in 1 month in history. Up to now, this year, 2.2 million. And I'm banking that it's going to be close to 3 million by the end of this year. These same people that have no problem with illegals, terrorists, people we don't know, cartels, fentanyl coming into our country. No problem with that. But you have a homeschool family, a wonderful family that are working jobs, not living off the government. Their kids have already got themselves involved in jobs and school and all of that. You have them coming into the country, and yet they want to kick out that family, but they want to bring in all the illegals into this country, which is just crashing our system, destroying our sovereignty. Well, that's going to be another message sometime, right? The parents were reportedly given no written document explaining the situation or the next step. They were given instructions regarding what would happen, to their minor children who are 12 and 10 years old and were born in the U.S. He said that the Rumke family, 5 adult children's status is also of concern. Some are married to U.S. citizens and others are not. We just don't know at this point. Would you keep those kids here because they're U.S. citizens? What would you do with the people that are married? So would you send the wives back, right? Their other daughters back, and the sons stay here? They should have status once they do get married. Let's go on. Bowden said, "You can imagine showing up in 2 weeks and not knowing, will they take me or my wife into custody? What will happen to our 2 minor children who are literally U.S. citizens? The uncertainty is just remarkable." Now, let me go a little deeper into this. The Rumke family faced similar issues a decade ago. And is this news? When the Obama administration threatened to deport them in 2012 after they were initially granted asylum by an immigration judge 2 years earlier. So this is something that Obama decided to pull on them as well. The judge's decision was overturned and the family appealed, but the Supreme Court declined to review the case. And that's, by the way, Obama's court before President Trump got in there. It's just, think about this. So under the Obama administration, they tried to get rid of this Christian family. Under the Biden regime, they're trying to do the same thing, all right? Biden can end this. That's right. He has the executive authority to end this. Listen to this. A petition was granted to the White House with over 120,000 signatures demanding that the executive branch take action to protect this family, according to the Christian Post. In 2014, the Department of Homeland Security granted the family indefinite deferred action status. And what makes everybody so mad is Joe Biden will let millions of illegals, no COVID check, no vetting, into our country. And yet you have a Christian family that has made a living here, that are decent people, that work jobs, don't live off the government take. Actually adding to our country, but we're going to kick them out, right? He said that the Romenkis family have been a delightful family as he's worked on their case, that he's the most delightful family that anyone could meet, all right? That's what he said. And what can we do? Well, they're working on it, right? We have a lot of pro bono people working on it. Attorneys trying to help change things. They need our prayers. They need our prayers. They need us to speak up. They need the local authorities or the local representatives. Now, hopefully you can find a Republican, because Democrats are going to go along with anything. People need to speak up, and we need to contact our representatives and senators to help them out. But I want to get and you know what you didn't hear? Now, Fox News had a little blip about this, all right? They had a little blip, but you didn't hear anything from the leftist, Marxist, mainstream or lamestream media. Didn't hear a word. And maybe you did, but I didn't hear anything. I'm trying to check on NBC, CBS, CNN, the same crew. All right. Now, have you ever been in trouble? And what I mean by that is, have you ever had what we would call tough times, a crisis, how do you deal with the crisis? Psalm 46. The Bible has a wonderful way that we can deal with the crisis, because we're all going to have trouble. We're going to have a crisis. We're going to have stuff happen, right? Life is not always going to be easy. Sometimes we're going to have a life filled with tough times, problems, trials, crisis, disasters, situations, issues, sometimes catastrophic things. So how in the world can we do this? Well, Psalm 46 is a crisis psalm. And I want to I'll tell you what I'll do. Let me give you a background, then we'll go ahead and read some of the passages out of Psalm 46. But you have to understand the background of this passage mentioned in Psalms. If you go to 2 Kings chapter 18 and 19 in the Bible, here's what happened. I don't have time to read that today, but you can go back and read it on your own. There was a siege of Jerusalem by the king of Assyria by the name of Sennacherib. Sennacherib, that was 701 BC. He laid a siege against the city of Jerusalem. Now, Hezekiah, the king of Judah, his first thought was that I will pay him off. He tried to pay him off. You go to 2 Kings 18, verse 28 through 36. And guess what? It didn't help. He didn't want any money. But God had a prophet. And that prophet was the name of Isaiah. And Isaiah prophesied victory for the nation. Rather than paying him off, he ended up going to God. The prophet, God spoke to the prophet, and the prophet said, listen, if you fight, you're going to win. 2 Kings 19, one angel in one night killed 185,000 men. Now, let me stop right here. That just tells you, if one angel can do that, what can 10 angels do? What could 10,000 angels do? One angel killed 185,000 of these Syrians. And the only one that was left was Sennacherib. Sennacherib was left. Later on, he was murdered, just to let you know. And God can help you in a crisis. And so once you understand the background of that psalm, now let me go ahead and read it to you, all right? Now you can understand why this psalm was written. God is our refuge and strength, a very, very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, even though the earth be removed, and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea, though its waters roar and be troubled, though the mountains shake with its swelling. Look at verse 4. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place of the tabernacle of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. God shall help her, just at the break of dawn. The nations raged, the kingdoms were moved. He uttered his voice, the earth melted. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Selah. Come, behold the works of the Lord, who has made desolations in the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and cuts the spear in two. He burns the chariots in the fire. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. And then finally, verse 11, the Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Selah. Now, what we're going to find out in this passage, I'm going to break it down real quick, is there are 3 steps that we can take in order to overcome a crisis. 3 steps that we can take in order to get victory in tough times. Verse 1 through 3 says this: don't fear, be strong. Don't fear, be strong. And what does he say? God is our refuge, a very present help in time of trouble. Now let's look at the word. The word God there is Elohim in the Hebrew, which means the mighty God. In the context here, it's the mighty God, the God that can do all things. It is the warrior God. He says that God is our refuge. Now, when you look at the word refuge, it simply means a place to watch, to go quietly for protection. That's what it means in the Hebrew. A place where you can go in a quiet place, watch this, and be protected. So he says, when disaster comes, God says, I will protect you. When you see trouble coming, quietly move toward God. what happens when you get in trouble? You know what happens when we get in trouble? We usually move away from God. People, sometimes, being a pastor, we see people that have issues, and when they're having issues because they don't show up in church for 3 or 4 weeks. So rather than, if you've got issues in your family and issues in your life, rather than run from God, run to God. He said, God is your refuge. And I like this verse, a very present and strength, okay, a very present help in trouble. Now, you could actually translate that very present as in ever present, which means abundantly available, that God is abundantly available to help you through your trouble. He's always ready. He's not far off. And you take the word trouble, because I've got to tell you what this word means. This is cool. That word trouble actually means to be in a tight place. How many of you have been in a tight place, between a rock and a hard place? Think about Santa Claus getting stuck in the chimney, sliding. That's exactly what this word means. It's being in a tight place, being in trouble, having a crisis, being in some problem. It sometimes feels that you're being pushed in from all sides, that you're in a tight place. There's no way for you to get through that. God is a refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble, a tight place. Therefore, watch, we will not fear, even though the earth be removed, and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea, though the waters roar and are troubled, though the mountains shake and it is swelling. Did you see the words here? Earth gives way, mountains fall, water roars and foam, mountains quake. It's interesting, isn't it, that in Israel's very familiar with earthquakes. The Jordan Valley is part of a huge geological rift which stretches all the way to Africa. And what he's saying here is what? Don't fear, be strong. Don't fear, be strong. God's protection during natural disasters. God protects you during invading armies. And the point here that even if the worst impossible should happen, the worst thing you can happen, he says, don't fear. Don't fear, stand strong, because it's not your strength. You're standing in God's strength. I remember Vince Lombardi, the famous coach of the Green Bay Packers. Remember back in the 60s, he had this famous saying, said this, fear makes cowards of us all. Stand with God against Satan, against disasters, and against trouble. That's the first thing you got to do. That's the second thing. Watch. Don't worry. Be smart. Look at verse 4, 5, 6, 7. Don't worry. Be smart. Now remember, there is a river, verse 4. Now I want to pull over and park on that for just a second. That word means a constantly flowing river, a river. So what is he speaking about here? I believe he's speaking of the spring of Gihon. That was in the Kidron Valley. It was called the waters of Shiloh. The waters of Shiloh. And this was Jerusalem's most ancient water supply. And Hezekiah, during this battle, diverted the water supply through a conduit that was 1,777 feet long. Now, this water supply and this conduit he made was hewn out of solid rock. It was the city's reservoir. He says, there is a river that what? Whose streams shall make glad the city of God. So what Hezekiah did, he covered and hid the water supply from the enemy. See, when you're laying siege against a city, you can cut off their food supply, right? You can do that. But what he did, because by the way, they also cut off their water. Man, once you cut the water supply off, that's it. You're going to give up. The city had a secret river. That's my point. And you and I, when you're going through a tough time, you have a secret source of strength, a secret source of nourishment, a secret source of refreshing, all right? Verse 7 says this, the Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. So here, the picture here is this. Hezekiah had a secret source that they couldn't cut off, and he could still win the battle, right? He could still keep water and flowing for the people. In the same way, when you're going through a tough time, there is a secret source for you. It's a secret source of strength that God has given you, all right? So he says, don't worry, be smart. And in verse 7, he says this, because the Lord of hosts is with us, and he is, watch, the God of Jacob is our refuge. Now, the little phrase there in the Hebrew is with us. You ready for this? It's a Hebrew word. It's Imanu. It's related to the word Emmanuel. When Jesus was born, and Isaiah 14 predicted this, right? It said he would be called Jesus. And then in Isaiah 14, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and we shall call his name Emmanuel, which means God is with us. The word in verse 7, that little phrase, is with us, in the Hebrew means that God is with us. God the Father is the fountain of living water. God the Son is a wellspring of living water. And the Spirit is a river of living water. John said that in John chapter 7, man. Let's see, I marked it because I really wanted to kind of read some of it to you real quick. John 7, verse 37, on the last day, that great day of the feast, Jesus stood and cried, saying, if anyone thirsts, let him come to me and drink. Watch this. He who believes in me, as the scripture has said, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water. Whoa. During the crisis that you're going to go through, all of us will go through a crisis to one degree or another. During the crisis, the Holy Spirit will provide you with a deep, unfailing reservoir of spiritual nourishment and refreshing. Water speaks of the presence of the Holy Spirit. It speaks of God's presence. And I just remember what Isaiah said, and I think it's in Isaiah. Yes, he said this: when the enemy comes in like a flood, the Spirit of the Lord will lift up a standard against him. All right. What's the third thing you do? Don't run. Be still. Verse 8 through 11. Don't run. Be still. What's the first thing you do when something goes wrong? You want to run away. You want to run to the bank, run here and there. You want to run to get help, all right? And we just get out of the situation. But it doesn't change the situation. Verse 8, he says this: come and behold the works of the Lord, who has made desolations in the earth. He makes wars to cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow, cuts the spear in two. He burns the chariot with fire. Be still and know that I am God. You know, I think about our country. God can deal with this political chaos, the economy, and all the virus and all that mess. But it doesn't mean that we don't sit idle and we don't vote or don't speak out, don't get involved. But ultimately, folks, listen, ultimately, we have to trust God through the whole process. We have to get involved. We have to vote. But ultimately, we're going to have to trust God to get us out of the mess that they put our country in. Don't run, be still. And then he says here at the very end, be still and know that I am God. I'll be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. Now, the little phrase, 2 words, be still, means to let go and relax. Don't panic. Don't run. Cease from your own activity. Watch. Stop, listen, and trust. When you're in the middle of a problem, in the middle of an issue, something that looks so big that you don't think you can get out of it, don't run. Be still. When you're in the middle, stop, watch, listen, and then trust God, because God has a plan. And if you're always going crazy and acting the fool, all right, and trying to run away from it, you can't hear God. God has the plan. Secondly, God has the power. You've got to believe it. Once he has the plan, he's got the power to fulfill that plan. And then get out of God's way, and he will be exalted. Stop struggling. Stop ceasing from your own self-effort. Submit to God and believe God. If you would stop long enough just to hear God, I think you could get out of your mess. Now, he also says one more thing. We'll close with this. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Genesis 32, God met Jacob when he had nothing. God met Jacob. Jacob was in a crisis. He could have lost his life, the life of his family, the life of his wife, everything. But in the middle of that, when he had nothing, when he deserved nothing, God met Jacob in his sin. He met Jacob when he was a failure. When Jacob was overwhelmed by fear and God met him, he changed his name and blessed him. He changed his name from Jacob to Israel. Wow. See, the secret here is when trouble comes, don't run. Wait on him, and he will give you the strength. And also he will be free. He will be free to solve the problem. Once you get out of the mess, once you back away and give God space, God will take care of it, all right? He will solve the problem, all right? I was very shocked when I read this next article, and I read it in several different places, so you could probably find it now. 1,000 minors reported missing by Cleveland this year. It's Cleveland, Ohio, by the way. 1,000 kids missing in Cleveland, Ohio this year, 50 kids this month, all right? Now, so far in Cleveland, Ohio, there's been reported 1,072 children have been reported missing so far in 2023 in the Cleveland, Akron area. More than 1,000 children have been reported missing around Cleveland this year, including 50 minors, all right? Yes, of course, let me read bits and pieces of this. Yes, of course, we're worried about that. Great, I'm glad they're worried. The Ohio Attorney General David Yost told News 5 Cleveland in an interview Monday. Now, he said this, what we know is that when we look behind the numbers, some of those represent repeated runaways, and local police have talked about that. All of these things have localized reporting problems that, again, are a function of local conditions, blah, 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 blah. Basically, we don't know. It's out of our hands. And he says this, I am fearful of all kinds of things that fall through the cracks that include missing children. There's a lot of things that fall. This guy's a Republican. But the city of Cleveland is run by a George Soros Democrat. That means a leftist Democrat. This is a defund the police Democrat. And I believe if you check things out, you might find that city of Cleveland has defunded the police, and they're having issues with keeping police on the job. He says this is what the Attorney General says. Law enforcement can't be everywhere, and can't see everything. We rely on the people, the population, because we have 11.7 million, that's in the whole thing, pairs of eyes out there that can keep an eye out. Well, I want to tell you, have they said one thing? One thing I didn't read in the article, maybe towards the end we'll read something. Have they heard of a thing called sex trafficking? America is number one in the world in sex trafficking. And you know what the other top country is? Ukraine in sex trafficking. Orphanages are missing. There are right at the beginning of the war, there were 30,000 kids missing, and nobody knows where they are in Ukraine. All right, let me continue this. These are the ages of 12 to 17-year-olds. They've been reported missing which has remained at unprecedented levels throughout the month. For some reason, 2023, we've seen a lot more than we normally see, which is troubling in part because we don't know what's going on with some of these kids, whether they're being trafficked, good, he said it, or whether they're involved in gang activity or drugs, which is probably part of that as well. Describing the number of missing children area as something he has not seen in his 33-year career. There's always peaks and valleys with missing persons, but this year, it seemed like an extraordinary year. You know, folks, I'm telling you, this is much deeper than they really realize. I can't go into all the details. The sex trafficking is so evil. When we've opened up the borders, we allowed sexual perverts in as well. When we opened up the borders, we allowed the cartels to sex traffic in America. I saw this one video of a cartel member had his face covered, and he was actually thanking Joe Biden for opening up the borders. I mean, they're making millions and millions and millions of dollars. And they're going to these big cities. And if anybody and their mother can come through our country, who in the world knows where they're going to end up? They end up in New York, they end up in Seattle, they end up, in Cleveland. And I'm very concerned that this is much bigger than gangs and drugs. Drugs is definitely part of it. I'm concerned that we have children that are being sex trafficked in this country. And I know that the Biden regime has turned their back on it. I know that many of these Soros attorney generals around the country, we talked about that in a podcast or two ago, and many mayors that are running Democratic cities, they just doing the worst thing, the stupidest thing by defunding police, by making it hard for police to even make arrests, by no cash bail, goes on and on and on. And what they do is encouraging criminals. And I'm worried and very concerned about this. The problems are the result of this wave of crime, but the problems are the result in these Democratic run cities. We've got an issue here. Folks, the 2024 election is much more than the president. It's all about the local elections as well. I saw on a podcast a while back that said, how in the world can we change things in our country? They said, get local. Who you put in as your mayor, who you put in as your commissioner and the school board and all of that is very important. That's one way we can win the battle. We have to win the war by winning the battle in every one of these cities. Hey, thank you so much for listening. I hope you like and subscribe. All right. And maybe share as well. And we're going to continue every week to put out a great podcast. And we've got some great stuff coming up here in the next few weeks. All right. Again, God bless you. And thanks for listening.